Thank you all. Thank you, Sarah, for doing our minutes this evening. We're back to the top. Last name has an A, so.
It's, again, a tyranny of the alphabet.
Minutes for January 24th. Thank you, I think it was Robert?
Yep.
Can I have a motion to approve, please?
Motion approved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So, you know,
Mayor's communication. Should be another seat back there, sir, I hope. Yep, there you go. Mayor's communication, and she arrived. That's good timing. I have Mark down as well, but do you have anything to add before we go to Mark? Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, this is our city attorney, Mark Tanner, who wanted to come, get a sense of what, I had asked him some questions, and he has questions for us. So Mark, before I get into my questions, I'd like you to go ahead and ask what you think you need to know, if you do.
Well, I first of all, I just want to say that I'm amazed at the turnout.
We get them like
Well,
this
a lot
all
of
the
these
time.
people are here
every
for
week.
the Tom Peak fan club.
And I just appreciate what everybody's doing. It's a very important thing for the city to have people who are actively involved in this sort of thing. As you know, the work that you're doing more or less dictates how the city is governed, right? There's the state laws, and then there's the charter comes right after that, so it's critically important. I've been asked by Councilor Rist 3 principal questions, and I really more or less wanted to have a conversation about those questions before I render a formal opinion on these things. And so I thought that this might be the appropriate
Sure.
place to do it. So I don't know if everybody has access to the questions that you had sent me or not. But the first one was sort of twofold. It involved some work that the Collin Center was doing relative to personnel policies for the city. I can tell you that I've looked through those, at least drafts of their report, relatively closely, and have had conversations with the mayor on that. And my review of the report was really, if they make these types of recommendations, one, can the city even do the things they're recommending?
Is that based on our current charter?
Under the charter or the state laws
Okay.
that will allow for that. And two, if the city decided that they wanted to implement those things, how would we do it? And so there was a back and forth between myself, the mayor's office, and the Collins Center, and I've not seen their final draft yet, but there were a number of proposals that they had suggested that I couldn't find a basis in state law or in the charter to allow to happen. And so I'm assuming that once we get the final version, or once I have the opportunity to see the final version of their policy, then I'll be in a position to make some recommendations about how you might go about implementing those things, if you decide that that's something that you want to do.
So just so the committee knows, I don't remember if I had sent these questions. The main question for that was Article 6, reviewing administrative code and things regarding positions, and we skipped over that, waiting for this report and Mark's opinion on what charter changes, if any, were necessary to implement those recommendations. So we're still waiting on that. So that was the question I gave him regarding that. And to me, that's very important, because that was a very important question. And I don't know if the committee wants to chime in, but for me, figuring out how positions can be established and or divided, pay plan, etc., was very important. And I think we had a kind of a controversy early on in this term regarding the chief of staff position, and we just want to make sure that if we want to establish those types of things, how are they to happen, and if the charter needs to change, we would do that. Do we have any more chairs?
Down the end.
Down the end of the hall, you can go down this end.
I have some of that.
Okay.
No, all right. Go ahead. So, committee, that's what what Mark is referring to as the Collins Center report, which will dictate, number one, if we want to make those changes based on that report. So that's why we jumped over Article 6. So I'm sorry to hear that we don't have that report yet.
Well, I think that may in large part be due to the questions that I gave back to them about how you would go about implementing the types of things that they were suggesting.
Okay.
So The second portion of the first question you'd asked dealt with trying to identify and ascertain contradictions in the charter.
To me, that's less of a priority because I think that was originally something that I had asked based on the mayor's thought that it'd be better if you looked at it and then we would go through it. To me, that could be, if you have any glaring ones, okay, but that may be something we review after we're done. Because right now, the committee is at a point where we're trying to get stuff done that may require, like ranked choice voting, an election, which means we gotta get it to you early enough that it gets to the House Council in, say, June, so that they can say, yes, you can do this, and we get it on the election in August and September, get a ballot question. The other thing is, we're going to continue to work and try for a House special act, which might involve these kinds of changes, the administrative code changes, et cetera. So there's two tactics we're going right now to try and do. So I'm not necessarily wondering, and those contradictions, they would be valuable, but I'm not sure they should be a priority for you right now. From my point of view, I want the other committee members to chime in. Joe, anybody? We had asked about contradictions in the charter. I mean, if you saw things in there that really ought to be changed in your review of the charter, Mark, okay? Because they contradict each other.
Right.
Article 2 has something and Article 6 has something, and they both contradict each other. We found a couple of those already.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure that there are others. And the way that I think that those primarily get identified is as you're working through actual questions that involve interpreting the charter, then you have the chance to see where two different sections might conflict. To try and do it sort of as taking a step back and just looking for contradictions.
That's hard.
It's a really difficult.
Yeah, I realize that after the fact. Okay.
So the second, and I think this is the hardest of the questions that you asked me, was dealing with the sanctuary city.
Executive versus legislative authority.
So I can certainly write a formal opinion. I can tell you that
hi, Lauren.
as a city solicitor, you're always sort of remiss to take a position that's different than a prior city solicitor given, because you want to have continuity of government and continuity of policies. I've read all of Attorney Fitzgibbon's writings. I've read all of Bill Newman's writings and the documents that he submitted to Attorney Fitzgibbon. And then I have my own thoughts on the conversion of executive and legislative powers. And I'm certainly happy to put that in writing if you'd like me to. I can say that there's already, as I said, an opinion from Attorney Fitzgibbon that was rendered when he was the city solicitor. And so I'm happy to write another opinion if you'd like me to. But I just wanted to put that out there for you.
Well, I think we had two opinions, and the council voted not to agree with Jack's opinion,
Right.
but to write policy that might affect city employees. We got a new, last night, we got a new ordinance. My view on that is if the council wants to write that kind of policy, Jack felt there was that it wasn't allowed, Mr. Newman thought it was, et cetera. What would we, if we want to as a committee, write into the charter to make that clear to future councils and the future mayors that it's possible to write these? You're going to get a new ordinance eventually when they bring it to you. The new ordinance, which is called Welcoming and Trust, similar to the other ordinances. Does it violate the charter? If so, how can we fix the charter? It was a big question, and in my view, something that I don't think we, as a committee, when we got to that Article 3 and the mayor, right, Tom, we didn't have a conclusive way of looking at it to solve it. So that was important. If a solution was necessary, it may be the committee doesn't want to do the change, but if you looked at, I would like you to look at it, because it's very important to us to see fresh eyes. Obviously, different attorneys have different opinions. So, does the committee agree that we need to look at this? I kind of really want to see if we need to do this. If we need to change the charter.
I
Joe?
would generally, sorry.
I mean, my concern is, I think it's an important one, is the line between executive responsibility and legislative responsibility. And I just, and so just so that we're not usurping the legislative, executive responsibility and vice versa, maybe it's supposed to be vague, but is there a way to delineate, no telling a department how to do their day-to-day is into the executive? I mean, is there a way you can make that clearer, just so avoid we don't go through this, because in some respects I feel like we had, if the executive branch can tell a department how to do their day-to-day business, and the legislative branch can tell the executive department, is that two chiefs telling one group how to act? Or are we supposed to write how they are supposed to act, and the executive branch simply enforces how they are supposed to act? I mean, that's what I would like to clarify, so that going on, no matter what comes in front of us, we understand where our responsibilities.
I also had there's a difference of opinion. I call it policy ordinances versus those supervisory kinds of directions that come from any policy by the mayor, or from, if it's actually supervisory, it goes to day to day. And the charter right now is clear, the supervisor for most departments is the mayor. So that's why we really wanted you to look at that. But Robert, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's one issue that's brought this to the forefront, but I think similar to what was said previously, really looking holistically at
Right.
the role of executive versus legislative is more important, and not to just render a decision, a third opinion on this one issue. Because that's not particularly, it's really
No,
not about that one
right.
issue. It's about going forward, how does the city operate in the future with similar.
I wanted you to have
issues come up.
context as to why we were asking the question. So I don't necessarily need you to write an opinion on Jack's opinion, but look into this. Because you're gonna get another ordinance that deals with similar topics. I apologize.
And that's a very difficult topic. You know, we see at the national level, we see it all levels, we see in other cities and towns. That line is very difficult to define.
Yeah, I agree. I think the way Joe asked the question versus the way Dan asked it, like what we're looking for, or, you know, again, we're not looking for you to talk about those two opinions per se. We're more along the lines of what should we be doing from a logistical standpoint in the future for other pieces.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry, I have a work issue.
Guideposts. It's important to have guideposts
Right,
to
right.
figure out, like, this sort of thing is fine, what crosses the line
Right.
is when this sort of thing. I mean, like, I think we all agree that we can't write an ordinance saying that, like, a specific police officer should go and arrest somebody. That's out of bounds. And we also agree that we can write an ordinance saying that you can't park on a certain side of the street on a street. So there's somewhere in between there where there causes an issue, and trying to figure out just some sort of a general rule of thumb where that line is something that I think would make the lives of future counselors coming on and trying to figure out where their powers are a lot easier as a first-time counselor.
Okay.
Or long-term counseling.
So I guess if I'm hearing the committee, I think it is about the whole thing, not the opinions that Jack wrote on the other ones. The context is based on why we got into this discussion. The last question I had was really about the next term. Not so critical, but I'm pretty sure we have to have a whole new committee and a whole new council. Because you have a whole new council, we might have a new mayor, but we certainly have to have, in my view, a new committee formed. We can't continue this committee in 2020. Charter says you're supposed to do it in every year ending in 0. We could decide, okay, let's name a committee, and the committee will meet once and say we don't want to do anything. So that's less of a priority right now. The biggest question was number 2.
Okay.
And the Collin stuff, when you get it. I certainly want to try and look at that. We jumped over the whole article based on that. Okay? Is that, you look a little confused.
No, I'm not confused at all. It's just that the separation of legislative and executive powers is a huge issue that, as you see on the federal level, is an ongoing and constant battle for the last 200 years. And I'm just trying to think of how you sort
Are
of.
very
Who wants you to figure
Well, let me put it this way. It may be, we're gonna have that ordinance reviewed. Once it's amended, they're gonna send it to you, the new ordinance. You write an opinion on that based on the current charter. And you may say that this can't work because this contradicts Article 3, Section. If you make an opinion based, as you said, usually we look at contradictions or we look at issues when we have questions brought up. Maybe that's what we do, we wait for that. But I wanted you to know that that question was a big one. I didn't know till this last weekend that we were gonna get the new ordinance, so now we have something else to look at which relates to this. Mayor.
So I'm confused. I mean, certainly that executive and legislative on the federal level, I can't wait to see what it does with that. Bated breath. And, but I am confused on the question that this committee is looking for as far as clarification between legislative and executive as it pertains to a charter. I see as one question that the council, or this committee wants addressed. But then to pin it on an upcoming or presented ordinance seems that we could end up with an opinion based on the content of that ordinance rather than a guidepost.
Well, I'd like the guidepost. I was only bringing that up as that's coming.
On the ordinance.
No, a guidepost on, well, I used the wrong term. An opinion that we were gonna do originally, I'd like that, the executive versus legislative. He can look into that. I don't know how to answer the question, except that I'd like clarity on what future councils can do policy-wise. I don't know what's the easier way, what's the better way to do it, because you mentioned tax cases. Who had their hand up
I
first?
did.
Sarah.
Initially, this came up when we were discussing definitions, am I right? Legislative and executive.
I also
power.
brought it up when we were in the mayor's supervisory
Okay.
situation.
Yeah, and then we said, well, maybe we should define it. I'm just trying to give a little context. And then maybe we couldn't define it. So here we are.
Yeah, I think that one thing that we are working through is that in order to figure out what changes we might want or not want to make to the charter, we first need to figure out what the charter currently says, or maybe we don't, but it would be helpful to understand what the status quo is as we discuss ways that we might be able to either decide that that's perfectly fine and just clarify it, or decide to change the status quo. But we're gonna need to figure out where, it seems like it would be helpful to know where we currently stand, which has been a subject of disagreement for some time now.
And when two different, I don't know, there's two attorneys wrote two different opinions, they're respected attorneys, city attorney and Mr. Newman, so.
Right, so how do we expect him to come up with a different answer? Like, and I'm going back to, we're trying to figure out what the status quo is. We already have what the status, not you, but we already have what the status quo is because the attorney already, two attorneys already rendered, the city attorney rendered an opinion that it's this. The city council disagreed that it's this. That doesn't mean that he's wrong, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. So, like you said, 200 years, I don't know if we have a question for him yet to answer.
Is it fair to say that the answer for something like this ultimately gets decided through case law? I know Jack has indicated, I work in the city of Holyoke, and so the city of Holyoke has been the place that has the most cases that he can cite for past precedent, because the tension that's existed between the city council and the mayor here for years and years, and many of them have gone to legal action, and the courts have ultimately helped to define what that line is.
So I think that's a fair statement. I think that we can look at the issue and try and give you some policy considerations in how you're interpreting the charter, or how you might want to act in interpreting the charter. But you're right, ultimately, if you wanted a black and white decision on what this provision of the charter says, it would be some judge somewhere who would render that decision.
Right.
And hopefully, never get to that point, because it
Right.
means the city council is suing the mayor or vice versa.
Has that ever happened in any city in the country?
Oh, yeah.
Apparently it happens at the federal level, just today. Okay, well, Mark, thank you. I don't think we've given you enough guidance, but the question was confusing and difficult for us as well, so.
Actually, I have more insight than I walked in the door with, so I appreciate that.
Okay.
Just once again, thank you, and
When you do get the Collins report, and when the mayor is able to give us whatever, if there are recommendations in there that would clarify how positions should be dealt with in the charter, boy, I'd like to see that sooner than later.
Me too.
Because
Me too.
if there are major changes, again, we don't know what the House will say, but they may want those on the ballot, or we may want them on the ballot. So the voters decide, we're gonna change how positions are developed in the city, so. And it may be appropriate.
yeah, I would guess we could turn that around relatively quickly.
So, members of the public, in this committee, since most of you are new, Laura has been here a while, we allow public speak on each topic, not at the beginning of the meeting. So if you have a question on this particular topic, now's the time. When we get to a topic, say ranked choice voting, I'll ask public opinion. When I get all the public opinion, then we'll bring it to the members, okay? So right now, whatever Mark just said, if any of you have a comment, you're allowed to make it right now. Laura? How do you feel? I'm gonna give her a chair. Terrible.
I'm fine. I'm perfectly, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Do you know how many topics are there prior to responsibilities?
We're doing, we have to finish Article 5 and vote on the entire article. We have most of it done. We're concluding interdepartment transfers. And then we're gonna get to Article 7. Article 7, we go piece by piece. Now, I believe Tom's things are in it, about third, fourth section, and most of the other ones are very minor, so it'll be about a half hour. Oh, is that too long for you?
Yeah, no, I'm so sorry, I was wordsmithing. Tom, thank God, I'm sorry, no
That's all right.
eloquent, no brief but eloquent speech, I really have to actually come up.
Okay.
But I'm really glad I came, because that was
All right.
fascinating, I'm very.
If you're interested in the topic, we are probably gonna do it again next meeting, and look at the agendas online,
Great,
okay, and you'll see where we're at.
thank you, everybody. All right,
And if you-
I look forward to hearing.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, so let's move to Article 5. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The last we spoke, we were trying to finish in interdepartment transfers. I have gotten opinions from Melissa, I've gotten opinions from Valerie, who is our
City auditor.
city auditor, sorry. I'm tired. And I added a number 2. You'll see it in yellow, or if you have the hard copy, it's not yellow, which tries to help the finance director and the mayor solve the problem of last 2 months of the fiscal year and the first 15 days. The way I read that, I think it was chapter 44, Melissa, it said the council had to approve it anyway, so this, to me, is the way to do it. Valerie says if we use the word function, general government, public safety, except for the school department, the mayor, while informing the council, can, in the last 2 months, move money that was previously appropriated. Now, this is doing what we talked about the last time, but we didn't want to do for the whole year. We're only doing it the last 2 months because it becomes a fiscal nightmare. We have old bills, set bills that have to be paid. And this allows for transfers within the section, the budget function because we previously, as a council, appropriated the funds through the budget process for that function. So we use the example of public safety. If money from the fire department wanted to be moved to the police department, now it takes, by virtue of our current charter, it takes mayor requesting it, goes to council, finance committee, and back, which in the months of May and June make it very difficult to get done in time. So I tried to solve that with this. And I'd like to hear from Melissa what she thinks of this language.
Well, Val likes it, and I don't have a problem with the intent. I mean, honestly, my only concern is that it's confusing to read, and I think it's going to be problematic, but we could try it. But it reads kind of like all over the map, the way I read it. Because it says one thing and then contradicts itself in the next paragraph.
Where does it contradict itself?
Well, it says that everything needs to go to the council, and then it says in May and June, everything
You
goes.
mean number 2?
Yeah. So, I get the intent, but we all here know the intent. But that is the problem with any document like this, is that 3 years from now, nobody knows the intent. So it's not that I have a problem with it, more that it,
My feeling is it does say the last 2 years.
last 2 years.
2 months.
2 months.
Tom, can you take over? I have an issue at work I gotta take.
Sure.
Just keep talking.
Keep talking.
Hi, everyone. Let's keep talking.
I'll be back in 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. Cool. We're on. So, all right. I just want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. We've got 2 bits of language right here. One that says from Melissa. One that says from Valerie Bernier. Right. That's where we are.
Let's go with Valerie.
But
Valerie, this is her thing. She's gonna make it nice. but
I think Dan
it's-
took that and combined that with suggested language.
Yeah.
So the one that Valerie suggested is the one that we are suggesting, replacing the current interdepartmental.
Problem solved,
No, I
sorry,
think
I
Dan's language-
apologize.
Different
I
than-
am employed. All right, well done. Where were we? So do we want to change this language, or what do we want to
I
do?
mean, I really don't have any suggestions, I'm just concerned about it,
Because it says the last 2 months, I think it does say something different. I need help from the committee. Mayor.
If I may comment, I share our finance director's concern about just losing intent over time. But I had an opportunity to talk to Val about the language she suggests and how it is, in line with best practice of auditors. I do think there's some clunkiness that could be clarified. I don't have that language, but I would suggest that the first paragraph maybe stays as it is, with then the second paragraph around the month of May and June as an exception out of the practice.
Well, I did that with number 2.
I think it just could be a little more exact.
I'm happy. I wrote this based on Val's
Yeah,
writing.
just the
So I'm happy to
transition from the
hear
first.
if people can be, let me talk about the first section. Those were the changes we talked about before that were really more housekeeping. Tom wanted the current balance of funds available to the agency. I put 2/3 majority because that's what the law says. I changed the word municipal to city. Electronic communication was added, all of that. And we took out in red, in my document, the rules thing, because we don't want our rules to define anything. It should be the charter. Anybody have a problem
Wait a
with
second,
one?
you put back in the fund balances?
I did that based on what about. I really am trying to help the finance director and the mayor gets things solved at the end of the year.
We put forward 4 or 5 things at a time. There's 4 or 5 things on your list at any given time. The fund balance is different based on what order you choose to vote them in. Right?
I'm not quite sure what you're saying.
You have 6 things presented before you,
You're talking
coming from a
about,
fund,
you're talking about an
Example.
example.
right?
Okay.
6 different things, capital project period of time, right?
All right,
And you choose, well, what's the fund balance? Well, the fund balance is $1 million, let's say.
mhm.
It might be $500,000 if all 6 things are approved. but we don't know what you're gonna do.
That's the balance after.
So you're talking about the language that says the
Balance at the
current,
beginning of the meeting,
With the
balance at the
beginning
end of the
of the
meeting.
meeting, yeah.
the current balance of funds available to that agency, you're talking about that language that you're saying is difficult. Tom, that was your language.
Yeah, I thought that we agreed that we were going to move that whole thing to rules. Did we, that's where I remember this being
Yeah,
left
because like, you know,
off.
like we were gonna give an attachment of an estimated balance, because this is like free cash, right? So
You know,
free cash
that
was
may
$1
be
million.
true, and I screwed up in not,
Because when we put, especially when we're putting forward capital projects, as you recall, we put through, I think, almost 10 things at the same time. One of them you didn't approve, some things you approved first and not last, so that the balance changes based on the order in which you take up the proposal and whether or not you accept that proposal.
I agree, and it may be, I remember now, that I forgot to take it out of my document.
Okay.
So, Tom, is that what you recall? We should,
I thought we were
everybody
going
agrees we
to-
delete the current balance of funds line?
So I have like that chart that I keep on my desk, and
Right. Does everybody recall
Dan used to
that?
ask me for it at meetings at times, and I could just attach that, like, these are
This
the
is where we
three
are right
things
now, yeah.
are in front of you. If they're approved, we'll be at this, but then this was approved last week, and so now these 4 things are in debate, you know,
Right.
so there's sort of, it is sort of a gray number, only because we're not gonna approve that stuff for Barbara to do ranked choice voting. I'm just kidding.
Don't go there.
He didn't like my joke. But you know what I'm saying, so if you approve that, then
Right.
that's a different number than if you don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I mean, I've always figured that the council, we're like, here's how much money's in this account right now,
Right.
and then we're gonna take these things out. We're asking that you appropriate money, like, people can do the arithmetic, but I do think that we agreed last time, if I'm not mistaken, someone correct me if I'm wrong, that this was something that we could handle within our own
We could,
rules without.
I do remember it now.
Okay.
I do
Yeah,
remember
so
it,
that-
and I
so
just
that
didn't
it's
take it
not
out of my
Part of the vote
document.
itself, that was
Right.
what I was afraid of, is it part of the vote itself, and then it sort of says, oh, this is the number, when, oh, actually, that's not really the number, because the thing from yesterday, we decided not to approve, or we changed the amount.
Yeah,
or-
right, exactly. So my thought at the time was that once we clear a couple things off of the rules docket, we'd make an
I have
attempt at
ideas
this.
on that, yes. you're right.
And we can hash that out in subcommittee. If we come to the decision that we really need a charter change, we can bring this back, but I think we can do it in rules. So that was
You know,
how I
just
was.
to provide information,
Yeah.
informational rather than like a rule. Well, I mean, it's a rule, but you know what I mean, like, rather than part of the charter and the
Yeah.
function of the
Right,
function of the
so-
transfer.
Mhm.
It's information required for decision-making purposes.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, I took that out. The next thing I wrote in was by its rules, that whole section. The procedure is defined by the charter, not by our rules. So I thought those rule statements were redundant, and I don't agree that council rules, which are easy to change, should be allowed to define fiscal procedure, as it is in the charter now. That's why I eliminated that language. I think we were all okay with that last time. Okay? Now, going on to number 2. I'd love to clarify this. I'd love to make it work for you, Melissa, so I don't know how to rewrite it.
I mean.
I kind of
Val's
pasted
fine.
it for Val with
Val's
this.
fine with it, but I'm just, we, unfortunately, we're talking amongst ourselves and we know what we're talking about.
Well, sure, you're finance people. You're auditors, you know what you're doing.
And so therefore, it's not always
And one of my
completely
problems
clear
was-
as to the real intent. And so that was my only concern, and I honestly don't know how to fix that, because I think we're doing 2 things at once, which is what you're trying to do, so, I mean, go with it, but I mean, that's just my only,
I have to say something in all honesty. I tried to remember where this was a problem. It may have been a problem internally, but you must have solved it, because I don't remember having to come back for a special meeting in June to approve a transfer. I don't remember doing that.
but you've done prior year bills.
Yes, but that's in July, and that's allowed, correct?
That's because we sat on them in May going, oh my God, we can't get this paid.
I understand. So what you're saying is, even though that's how we did it, it's not the way we should be doing it.
Well, right, and we
Okay.
have come in
Now I understand.
actually for special meetings, as you recall, when a veteran died,
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
and we had to have a special meeting in order to approve the money to pay for services, because we, you know, we
Well-
didn't know that we would blow our budget in the last, couple months of the year based on, a tragic event.
The counselors here are gonna be mad at me, but there's a solution to this. We always have 2 meetings in June in case we need it for this reason. I only say that because it's the end of the fiscal year, we have bills that need to be paid. It's not it's a council decision how many meetings we have, right, Barbara? It's not charter or anything.
Yeah, we could.
Joe, what do you think? I mean, this is confusing, I agree, but if we have another meeting in June,
And we get rid of all of this, is what you're saying?
well, get rid of 2 because it's too confusing, and then we continue. I don't know what you need. I'm trying to help you and the mayor out, so I don't know what to do here.
So, I mean, the flexibility, I mean, the willingness or decision of the council to have 2 meetings in June, I don't think automatically prevents this happening, that we're sitting on bills. I mean, it could still happen at the end of May. We might not get it through the 2 meetings in June or whatnot, or, the flexibility for the city and the position of mayor and the city council, I think that too, with maybe a little wordsmithing, makes a great deal of sense. We want to, for a variety of reasons, be able to pay our bills as soon as possible, and to leap into another fiscal year while it's doable. I don't see it as proactive. I think that before this committee now, that we can clarify the language a little bit. But it's an important concept and tool to have. And when I spoke with Val about this language and her compromise, she said it was a good compromise, it made good sense, and it was just easier to put in proactive procedures and act proactively, rather than into the new fiscal year.
Yeah, I mean, she does like it, but I just, and so the intent, like I said, I mean, we're all on board, I'm just concerned about someone who's
Let me say
wasn't
something.
here today.
Right.
I understand it because I've been dealing with this for a long
Right.
time. You're maybe right about a future counselor not understanding it, but I don't think it's that, to me, it's not that confusing, I guess. But
Okay,
that's
well-
because I, like you, know what we're talking about. Tom and then Robert.
Okay, so I'm reading this language and I'm fine with it. The one thing is, I just want to, it says, in addition, the city council may by majority vote on recommendation of the mayor transfer within the last 2 months of the.
What are you reading?
This, right? This is what we're talking about, right?
No, I'm looking at my changes here.
I
I've-
printed out a bunch of things, okay.
What we're looking at is this language, which is a compromise between like Melissa's ideas and Valerie's
Okay,
ideas.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, read that over.
Yeah.
I'll go to Robert and then I'll come back to you.
Maybe a question is the concern that paragraphs 1 says one thing and paragraph 2 says something else?
Right.
Could it be as simple as adding a couple of words at the beginning of paragraph 1 that says, except as specified otherwise in paragraph 2?
Something like that.
Do it
might-
this way.
Okay.
yeah, or-
That recognize there's an inconsistency and.
But, okay, I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So should we add that?
Let's do it.
So would that be under 1? Read that again, except as
Except as modified in paragraph 2,
the
the following procedure
modified?
shall apply.
Is there a way that we say that?
I don't know if it's really necessary, but it certainly makes it
Well, I mean,
black and white. that-
Well, it shows that there's an exception to
Yeah,
number 1.
right.
I think it's
Right,
good.
but because that was my thing, is that number 1 says one thing, and
Right.
number 2 says something completely different.
So if number 1 acknowledges that inconsistency and says how to resolve the inconsistency,
Right.
then we should be all set.
I like it. I like it a lot. And I was always struggling for what anybody needed to clarify this stuff. But the language in 2, except for the school department, everybody understands when Valerie says function, I used to call that budget section. But function, the general government, there's areas in public safety, the police and the fire. Right now, you can't transfer. At the end of the year, fire has extra money, police is running out, mayor wants to transfer money just to pay for a bill. They'd have to go to the council now, get approval. It becomes an old bill in July. With this language, they'd be able to do it without doing that, right?
Right, more likely than not, it's something like dispatch, which is shared, or crossing guards, which is actually under police, you know what I mean? Something like that, where they're really all have one manager, but there's 5 or 6 different departments within a
And there's a deficit in one and you gotta fix it, yeah. Oh, well, that's what I was trying to do. Do we like this language, everybody?
I'm fine.
Tom, you're okay with it? Okay. Moving on, we're almost done. Supplemental appropriations. This was simply to clarify how procedures are done. All I did was refer the supplemental appropriation to a standing or select committee to consider it. Again, a 2/3 majority vote is necessary, that's law. Everybody understand what a supplemental appropriation is? Okay. Looks like we're okay. Members of the public, Article 5. You've heard a lot. Barbara?
I mean, I haven't been here, so you probably have put this in other places too, but I find that the notice under 57A, under intra-departmental transfers, right now, I just get a copy and I put it in the file and give it to the finance subcommittee. But you're saying we have to send it by electronic communication to the city council, post it on all bulletin boards, which we're gonna have to get a bigger bulletin board, and then somehow put it on the website, if we're just.
Why wouldn't it be able to be going on the website?
Well, I don't know where, this is just like moving from like city clerk personal services down to expenses. You know, these are minor little things within within a department.
It was the committee's desire to be as transparent as possible about money.
I just think that's overkill. I think to have everything, and then, I mean, I'm kind of wondering like where it would be and like how it would be posted. And then on the bulletin board, you say bulletin boards, like.
You just mean electronic bulletin boards?
But I don't.
She's talking about actually posting them
You
all
say
around the.
posted on the city bulletin boards and by electronic communication to the public, which I'm not really sure, I don't really understand what that would be.
That comes from other language we've added.
Well, I know, that's
have-
why I say maybe, I think that's a little overkill, and I'm kind of wondering like how it's gonna be implemented. That's my concern. I just.
In the interest of transparency, we wanted electronic communication. I have no problem with
What does that
removing.
really mean?
I have removing posted on the city bulletin boards, removing that. Electronic communication is defined as,
How are
in
you-
this case, the website.
Okay, like how are you doing
You make a PDF and you put it out there.
every single little transfer that
Yeah.
comes?
Where it is in my contact.
I mean,
We're trying to, right? Am I wrong here?
I think that's overkill. I mean, the transfers, when they go to the council, they're on the council level. I don't know, to me, it just seems like.
Well, here's the thing. You put when you have a transfer that's on the agenda,
Yep,
you send it, you put it on the
Right.
website on the agenda.
right.
That's all it needs.
Well, this does not go to this intra does not go to the agenda. It's not an agenda.
We only get it through the finance committee.
Yeah, it says it's filed with me, and out of courtesy, I give it to the finance subcommittees, so you know
But how is
what's
the
going
council
on.
informed now about an intra-department transfer?
we are, if you're not in finance or
It's usually end of year things, usually.
We've had intra-department transfers in the middle of the year.
Sometimes,
I think the full council is supposed to be informed.
no, they're not. It says, shall be filed with the clerk of the city council. I have
My
them all.
thought with that was that the full council should be informed. What does the committee want to do? Listening to Barbara, she's concerned. I have no problem with posted on city bulletin boards could be removed.
Barbara, just so we did talk about electronic communications and coming up with a definition of that, and the definition we ended up coming up with, just so you know, is shall be defined as any media that is used the internet for communication. Digital media may include, but not limited to, social media, websites, or email communications. That's the electronic communication that's the definition, if you will.
And you
I don't
solve
know.
that problem by posting it on the website. That does that.
Yeah, I mean.
It's the modern way of informing people what's going on.
I don't know, it just seems like,
I think that,
especially this first one, the intro. I just don't see the point of that. But, and then even on the others, I mean, when you talk about the bulletin boards, and, you know, I'm gonna have to get more bulletin boards, because there's not room
Well,
for every.
we'll relook at bulletin boards and other subjects. I don't mind removing bulletin boards on this, but I would have a problem removing electronic communication. Anytime we move money around, everybody should be informed in the city. That's what we were trying to do with this. The council right now, only the finance committee, why are we only the ones getting it? Tom?
so Barb, I think maybe it would be helpful for us to have a meeting on a more global sense about, there has been a strong desire in the committee to figure out ways in which the public can be informed about a lot of things that they might not necessarily currently be informed about, thus the electronic communication, thus this other stuff. And it might be really helpful at some point in the future for us to sit down and have, like, I'm just suggesting this, have like an intensive session with you where we work.
Yeah, I just.
Talk
can't
about the
figure
charter
out how it
committee?
would
Right.
work.
Like with the charter committee and Barb to, like, we could just have a meeting to set aside, because it's not just in here, you'll
Right.
find
Oh, yes, I
similar
know.
language
Yeah.
in a lot of other sections.
Right.
And there might be stuff where you have some thoughts about what would be really
Doable.
good ways to do this and
Right.
what might be really difficult, and that all seems, but that's not just in this section, that's,
Right.
that's more of a global thing, and I'd personally rather address that more as a global charter-wide thing, because we've been doing things in kind of the same way in all these sections. Does that
Yep.
logic make
Yep.
sense?
I will send the revisions I have so far to you, Barb.
Yeah, I mean, I've been
I would
seeing
like
things
you to
from-
give us your information that you have. That'd be great. Melissa?
So, I don't know if the council's aware of this, but Valerie does send out every month, at least to the finance committee, and I'm sure it would take her 2 more clicks to add the entire council to it, every single expense report. And
I think we all get those.
and so those, I think it's just the finance committee. And in those, you can see where the money moves, if you learn how to read them. So is the information available in another way, or is that not sufficient?
Well,
I just wanted to, you know, like, because she does make it, every month she gives us a, you know, where we are in our expenses, where we are in our revenues, and if money moves in a budget, you can see it because it's an adjusted budget from the prior month.
in my opinion, that solves this problem in the sense that it answers. It does,
Well, for
it does
finance,
exactly.
just for finance, you know,
No,
like-
right now, I think all the changes, she sends it to the whole council, and you've solved the problem.
Right, so
The
it's
other
not the
question-
one sheet that says Melissa moved, you know, $500 from her salary line to expense to cover a bill because she's gonna save,
Right.
because she had a little extra, or vice versa, or like move $500 from expense to cover a longevity payment she forgot about, or something like that. It doesn't say that, but you can kind of see it in the detail.
Well, we
of the
were
budget.
getting that kind of thing as the finance committee. I don't
You
see-
are getting it, yeah, and
I don't see why the whole council can't get that. It's a click.
right.
It's a
right.
PDF and a
That's
click.
what we all agree on.
Yeah.
We all-
Right, the only thing I would change here, I agree with Barbara, is posted on the city bulletin boards. It's not necessary for this particular transfer. How does the committee feel about that? City bulletin boards are physical boards.
I think that's fine. I don't really think there's a lot of people who are getting their information by walking up to the municipal building and looking at the bulletin boards.
I agree, and that's only because I didn't want to eliminate language that was here.
There's some statutory requirements for posting on bulletin boards
Some-
still for some
some
items.
Open meeting law.
Yeah.
But I think that would solve the problem. Electronic communication is, in that case, you could send the little thing to the whole council. You make a PDF and you send it to the whole council, done. That solves that problem.
Right, I mean, it's 72 pages, I just looked at December, it's 72 pages long.
Well, if she's sending that to finance, I'm talking about these little letters that the finance committee gets. The only difference is, it's not just the finance committee, it's everybody gets them.
Well, right, but they're, you know what I mean, it wouldn't call out the changes as much as you would have to look at it and notice the changes.
Right, well,
So I'm asking if that's sufficient.
That is one thing, but
Yeah.
if Barbara is sending us these things now, which she has been doing, I don't see why they can't be electronically done, not save the trees.
Well, I don't get them electronically.
Huh?
I don't get them electronically.
Well, all you do is make a copy, a PDF, and send it
Yeah,
out.
that's, yeah.
All right, I don't know. What does the committee want to do with this? Anything? I eliminated posted on bulletin boards.
I think I'm fine to move it forward as is, and I do think that we need to circle back at some point across this entire document and look at the specific new like asks that we're making of the clerk's office, but
I
think
would need her input, that's all.
yeah, but I think that conversation is gonna be across a lot of things, not just this, so I say we approve this as is, and if we come back and wanna make a change here, it's gonna be a change that we make to a bunch of other chapters too, so that seems like a conversation for another day.
Agreed,
to
Tom.
me.
I agree.
All right, then I move that we accept.
No motion yet. I want to make sure, we're going to do the entire Article 5, because we haven't
Yeah.
done anything yet. But I want to make sure that nobody has any problems with we haven't gotten capital improvement program and independent audit. Are there any changes requested? Does the mayor or finance director look at those and want any language changes in there before we move the whole document? Okay. So I will send this out. Now, Tom, the entire document, Article 5.
I move that we accept all of the changes that we've made to Article 5.
Second.
Discussion.
Do we need to make one correction on page 3, where we struck the current balances in favor of putting it in the rules?
I already did that.
But in the vote, somehow we need to formalize
Well-
what it is we're approving.
Okay, since you last got this document,
Yep.
the changes we made included removing that fund balances, removing posted on bulletin board, and adding number 2 under interdepartment transfers. That's the only thing that was changed since we last looked at the document. Now, we haven't voted any of this.
Right.
And let me say this, we can move this, I'm gonna send it out, this is what's been approved. I'm gonna send the entire charter approved to date. And I hope all of us are looking at it, because we can always go back to it and say, wait a minute, this is a problem, which is what Barb would do, I hope, for anything that she's worried about communication, okay?
It was just really strictly for sake of clarity, that we're not approving this written document exactly as written, we're approving
as
this
amended,
document
or as
as
amended.
modified,
Well,
as you just explained.
But I also will say, Tom, did I forget something again? Because I forgot about the fund balance thing. I'm gonna send this out after we voted as a finished approved changes. Okay? Any more discussion? Members, all in favor?
Aye.
You know, there's 7 to 0. There's 7 people here, members. The only person not here is David, he's the eighth.
I know, I had to count myself.
Okay, what everybody's been waiting for, Article 7. As we have been doing, I'm gonna start from the beginning, and we'll get to ranked choice voting when we get there.
Does anyone need a copy?
There's Tom's suggestions and my suggestions, which are fairly similar. The word precinct was changed way back from district. Tom and I in 7-2. Does anybody want to change the date of the city elections? I jumped over that. If there's any left, yeah. When's it
Two
written?
separate documents that cover the same section.
Okay. The city elections will be held on Sarah Amorosa's birthday every year.
Okay.
So nobody wants to change the date of the elections? Good. 7-2, nominations. I removed the word preliminary.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We don't have a primary or preliminary election.
Maybe we should.
That's what we're trying to avoid.
Was that a real statement?
Another one.
Pat, was that a real statement?
That was a half-real statement, yeah.
This is when we're talking about it.
I was reading it.
Do you,
No, just keep going. It's fine.
Okay.
So you're saying we should have a primary, if there's 4 people running for mayor, we have a primary and get rid of 3?
Maybe I am.
That
Well,
would
then we
address
eliminate
one-
ranked choice voting. Why are we doing ranked choice voting?
Who says we're doing ranked choice?
I don't know, I'm just saying.
There you go.
I mean, it has to be one or the other, basically.
No, it doesn't.
But
We don't have it now.
right,
The
we
other,
don't-
no, what I would like,
it should be one or the other.
it should be,
Yeah, it's better.
That's a better, that's,
I also
I'm
thought
not
that
even
a
certain about
runoff
shared
election is
opinion,
also
but it's-
possible.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's also possible. You're right.
sure.
There's a third possibility is a runoff election.
Okay. I don't like this cost the city any more money, so I'm not against any additional elections, so I would be more in favor of a ranked choice vote where it's all done.
All right, well, let's get to that. We'll go back to preliminary elections if we all vote down ranked choice voting. Tom, you had something on ballot positions, didn't you?
Oh, yeah,
I'm going by, in order of the section, section 7.3, ballot positions.
yeah, I'm sorry.
You
I think
said
I
a
printed out
separate
the wrong
drawing.
thing,
It's
but I'll
here,
tell you what
it's
it
here,
is.
well, it was there.
Oh, yeah, here.
For 7?
For 7, yeah.
Tom,
I can
7.
give you this, so we can share this, so that way he can.
That's fine.
All right, yeah, so I had suggested with ballot.
Separate drawing will be held
Yeah.
for each precinct's ballot.
Yeah, so my idea there was that I know that there was a lot of anxiety with the at-larges about, that if people get drawn last, that being on a lower ballot position for some people who are coming in, that historically that might actually affect your electability, unfortunately, because there might be some people who just fill out the first four bubbles. I don't know how prevalent this is, but this is a thing that a lot of the at-large counselors have expressed anxiety about in the past. I thought you could diversify the risk of that a little bit by just drawing.
This
like,
is for precincts.
no, yes, but in each precinct you have to have a different ballot because there's different precinct counselors on it. So you have that at-large race on 5 different ballots because you have to print 5 different ballots. So the idea was that if you drew the lots 5 times for the 5 different ballots, it would diversify the risk. I mean, it doesn't affect me personally at all. It was something that
Well, I think the
thought
word
that-
at-large has to be in here, because I thought you were talking about precinct counselors.
The precinct counselors, well, yeah,
Because,
Right.
Barbara, we do now, right? We do now. If there's 3 people running,
I have plenty of comments on this, so I just wanna,
all right, well,
whenever there's more than one, even if there's 2 for mayor, they have to draw. There's a drawing for everything. This isn't only at large, school committee too.
that's true, at the school committee, or if there were 7 precinct
So I have plenty
candidates,
of
yeah.
comments on it.
But I-
if-
I-
right
well-
now, we do a drawing for anything more than one.
Yes.
But if
We
you,
didn't have to draw for you.
right, yes, that's-
But you did for me.
or me.
Right,
But you're
right, for
suggesting.
2, you had 2, so we had to do 2.
I'm
Well, he's
suggesting for
suggesting-
any race that has more than one person on it, that we should have to do, and if it's a race that carries across the different precincts, if it's a mayoral election, if it's an at-large election, if it's a school committee election, that maybe it would be more fair to draw separately for each of the precinct ballots.
So you're saying have a drawing for precinct 1 ballot?
Yes.
And a drawing for precinct 2 ballot
Yes.
and a drawing for 3?
So in other words, if the mayor's running, there's 3 people running. Precinct 1, they all draw ballots, Cole's number 1. Precinct 2, she's number 3.
Yeah.
Because we've drawn it 5 times. Same thing for at-large.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara, comment on that.
Well, here, let's start. I will make my comments in that,
We're only talking about this ballot position.
no, so it would
she's got-
really be for anything.
Ballot
Yeah.
choice.
Good.
Okay.
Done her homework.
She did some work.
So I checked with our vendor, and there's a name for this. It's called ballot rotation. And the vendor told me that the only place that they know of that does it, and I don't know if it's nationwide or New England, is New Hampshire. And the thing you have to understand that it will affect the programming costs, because right now, the only difference between the ballots is the district counselor. So it's just one position. If every single precinct was different, you'd be programming a lot more differences between each precinct. So, number one, it would cost more. I think two, for the people, like Paparoff at the end of the night in the schools, looking at the tapes on the wall, it would just, you'd have to really be careful about like who you're looking for. Right now, right where everybody is, and you just go there. Same for school committee. And also for me, at the end of the night, when I'm putting it into my spreadsheet, it would just be easier to make mistakes, not, it can be done, it just would be more confusing. I have always thought it was very odd that everybody was mixed into one, and poor Joe, because Don Psychowski screws up a drawing, and we have to do it 3 times, he ends up at the bottom. So you have a
Does that
candidate
happen
for
to you, Joe?
re-election, but it's way at the
How did you get
bottom.
elected?
My sign said, vote the last name first.
So, I thought, well, maybe we could do it like, you could have a drawing for the incumbents. Incumbents would all draw, and then all the rest of the people could draw. And then, you'll see there, I polled a bunch of cities in the state, and almost all of them just do a drawing. Some do alphabetically. The state law says, candidates for re-election are listed first unless the charter states otherwise. So, if you think, you could just have the same drawing, but maybe just do the incumbents first, and then the new people next, and then, I don't know. It's just, I think it would be a little confusing, and I know it would cost more money
Well,
for programming. Just that.
Looking at
those
the
are my
fact-
comments.
I'd like to think that our voters are intelligent enough to know the
Well-
difference between the last person on the ballot, Joe McCoy, and someone
Right.
else who was on the number 1 on the ballot, didn't get elected. And he's proof that it does work. So,
Yep.
I'm not sure this is necessary.
I don't know
If
if
it's
it
gonna
is
add-
either. This
If
is
it
just-
adds a lot of confusion, I don't know.
Like, look, it's
That's just
just-
where I am right now, I'm not sure.
This is something that I'd heard people fret about leading up to that drawing. I thought this would help. It's not something that I'm really,
You really
like,
think they vote the
married
first
to.
4 people?
I would never do that, and I personally think that most of our voters are actually pretty involved and pretty smart, but it's something that I've heard people be concerned about before, so I thought this would be one way to fix it. I would be fine with other options. I don't have a strong, and this is not
Well,
something I strongly
Barbara's given
care
us a
about.
lot to look at. We can
Yeah.
come back to this after we look at it.
I think that's a good idea.
I don't
I
think we
have no
I don't-
urgency to change it myself.
I disagree. I disagree with the going back to look at it. I think that we should just stick with what we have. Unless Tom convinced me that, it's an issue that's a deal breaker. But I think that Barbara's done the homework, and I think the way we're doing it seems like it's the fairest way, standard practice among other communities, and we should just stick with it.
I think especially from the at-large position, I think it's a real effect. I think can be compensated for.
Yep.
I mean,
You did.
you either have a clever thing about me being last, and again, certainly incumbents get an advantage because their names have been thrown around enough times that it helps.
The word
Yeah.
incumbent
But
is
even
different.
even a new person, you may just need to have to make up, more effort. But
I do think the effect is real. I think if you look at the
Yeah.
school committee ranking this last vote, there was
Yes.
a
Yeah, right
clear
there.
trend towards the tail end of the ballot, receiving less votes. But that's luck sometimes.
Someone's always gonna be last.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, and you can be last
maybe doesn't
in all the
politics as
prison
much.
of the district, because if you do the drawing, you can be the last
could
in all
still
of
be
them.
last.
You can still be the last.
You could have 5 times rotten luck
It's
rather than
happening.
one.
Everything happens.
Yeah, totally.
Members of the public, Laura, did you want to say something? No? Okay.
So we have some.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I did say that.
I'm curious as to the scope of the cost difference. 'Cause are we talking-
$250 programming cost, plus programming costs. And I don't know what programming costs are.
Every
What are
ballot
they?
rotation difference is $50. So it would be the typical programming charge plus probably about $250. I mean, depends, so 5 precincts, $50. It's not
No.
huge.
No, because it would be $100 with the school committee
No,
and.
it's per ballot.
Per ballot.
Per ballot style.
Okay.
Yeah. That's not the huge part. I think it would just be,
I don't think the money's the issue, it's whether it's necessary. To me.
Yeah, I don't think it's not necessary.
and it would also be printing. Printing would be more too, because you'd have more changes on the ballot.
Well, We've had, what, 10 elections? I don't know. I like the fact that Joe won and he was last on the ballot. It makes me feel better about not changing it.
And not just that, like I said, you can be the last in all of them,
Even if you do draw,
even if
right.
you do draw.
Okay. Well, I can withdraw this with you guys.
Well, yeah, well, what I'm doing is I'll make changes based on what we all decided on my copy.
Okay.
So, going on to 7.4, did you have anything on 7.4? The only thing we changed was the word precinct from district. We did that early on in our project. 5 precincts. I know there was some discussion way back about changing how many precincts. I'm not there.
Do we even get to do that?
Shouldn't we do that, Bob?
Well,
The charter, I think we
precincts are
can.
done by redistricting, which is done pretty much by the state after the census.
But we can choose the number.
Well, we've had up to 7, but then we went down to 5.
I know, but it's a city
By what
decision.
process?
It's not, the
What?
state does the
There's-
redistricting
you
based
can
on what
only-
we decide.
Per precinct, you can only have not more than, I can't remember the number, 4,000 or 5,000 residents, not voters, residents. So after the census is done, they sit down and that's why after every federal census, there are minor changes to the precincts, because they have to readjust the lines.
And that's based on residents, that's based on
residents,
population.
not voters.
Is there a lower limit to that? Can we have precincts
4
12
precincts?
people? Yeah.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I don't think any of our precincts are really even close to the.
The max?
I mean, you might have to switch around because maybe Cottage Street picks up more people this year. They'll go in and they'll, according to the census block and track, and they'll move the lines around a little bit to make it work. Our census hasn't changed much at all.
Laura,
I'm not sure why how we ended up with that 7 precincts at one point, but.
it's been 5 since we changed to a chart, to
Yes.
city, right?
Yeah, it was before that.
All right. Laura?
Yeah, so from the research I did, there's actually no regulations on the number or the amount. The only regulations that I could find were the differentiations between precincts if you were electing separate offices per precinct. So for example, there might be cities that have only at-large councilors or something, in which case the precinct distinctions, they only had a regulation because of the number of polling places. So you could actually have as many or as few as you wanted, you just have to keep it within a certain percentage precinct. One can't far outweigh another.
And
So
in
that's
other
where
words,
the census information.
the most you could have by state law is 5,000 people in a precinct, if I heard you right. But you could have as little as 1,000 and have, in our case, 16 precincts, because we have 16,000 people. I mean, you could do that, I'm not saying you should, but I'm saying what the law allows.
If you can only have 5,000 people per precinct, then
Max.
how does Boston not have 100?
Well, Boston they have other rules. And I mean, I'm not
Well,
gonna say.
okay, how does
almost every
Springfield
state
not
except
have-
for Boston. I'm
5,000?
not sure of the exact number that.
What, the 5,000 isn't a law? 5,000 is, well, all right, well, neither here nor there, I don't think we're at a point where we want to change the quantity of precincts at this point.
Because obviously it relates directly to the quality of counselors.
Right.
And I know this came up very early, but I think about my experience here, there have been times, and maybe we're in a different time. I mean, I think last term, there was very much of a Trump effect and stuff, but we have had times where we're calling people and say, would you run for city council? So I'm hesitant to change the number of people yet, that we need.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to. I have always thought that under section 4, it should maybe just be, the territory of the city shall be divided into precincts without a number, because I always thought, what if it was to change? What if we got a huge influx of people and all of a sudden.
Where would we put them?
We'd still have to change the charter at that point, though, to
Well,
add.
but if you just took out the number, and you just put precincts.
Well, but even then,
But
we'd
who
have to
decides
change
how many
Article
precincts
2.
we should have?
Well, it all comes down to the census and the redistricting that happens. Like, if we had this huge complex come in and we gained 5,000 new people, we might be forced to go to 6 precincts.
But even then, we'd have to amend Article 2 of our charter because that states how many people there are on the city council.
All I'm saying is, if that were to happen, you do a charter change, you could do that. You could do a charter change, not every 10 years, you could do a charter change anytime you want. And that would be the case, if that were to happen, we had a sudden influx of people and we needed to change how many precincts.
I just think you don't have to say the 5, you just say precincts.
Well,
But like.
she's making that suggestion. Anybody think of,
It's just me, I don't know.
well, you're allowed to make suggestions. You've been here a while. Come
What
on.
do you think the advantage would be to not saying 5?
Because then you wouldn't be, I mean, I don't know if there are other sections that would be
What
affected.
Article 2. 2 says there's 5, I think, I don't have Article 2 in front of me, so. It may be that Article 2 also relates to 5. And Tom says it does, I trust
No,
Tom.
it says that there would be, it says that there's 4 at-large counselors. That's what you're talking about, right, Tom?
And that there's 5 precinct counselors.
And 5 of the members will be known as district counselors, which I assume you changed that to precinct
Yes.
also when you did that?
Yeah.
But could you not say that there would be a total of 9 counselors, and then, so, assuming that there's less than 9 precincts, you know, like it would be a counselor per precinct, and then any additional to get to the 9? Like, if you didn't define it with numbers, then there would give more flexibility for precinct changes. So if you all of a sudden had 6 or 7 precincts, like you had in the past, then you would have 7 district counselors and 2 at large.
So for me, before I have a real opinion on this, I need to get a better sense of what exactly the state's ability to mandate the number of precincts we have is, because that isn't
They don't.
clear to me at the time. Because,
Based on population. Yeah.
right, yeah, I just need to get a better sense of that, so.
Well, they
do you-
redistrict based
We'll
on,
be doing it soon.
they redistrict based on how many we have. If we decide to have 7, they would redistrict based on 7.
Right,
We
but-
had 7.
I assume
That's the
Barbara can get an
same-
opinion from the AG's office or somebody else fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I should know how many people are in a precinct. But I also, the second sentence that you have here, each such precinct shall be composed of voting precincts. That doesn't sound right now.
Where is that?
Second
Each
sentence.
because it did make sense when you had districts in there, but that doesn't make sense.
But our
Oh.
districts are not subdivided, are they?
Each such precinct.
So this sentence doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think that
Even
was
if
an
it said
autocorrect
district.
issue.
Well, it all auto-corrected, so what do we want to say there?
I think this.
I think if we change that second precinct back to district,
Huh?
say each such
I don't think we
precinct-
should do that,
I
because
think
we have
we
a
should take it right
definition.
out.
I think the sentence should go because it's
Doesn't make sense.
it's implying that the
The district is a.
is subdivided into precincts, which we don't do.
And it didn't make sense before.
Oh,
It
It
makes
didn't
sense
make
all right,
sense.
yeah, we can
Yeah.
just strike that sentence then.
All right, I'm doing it as we speak. What about this computer? In accordance with general law. So each such precinct shall be composed of voting precincts otherwise established according to general laws is cut. Correct? That's what I'm cutting. I don't feel compelled to change the word, to drop 5 at this point. I'd rather us face that problem in the future if we have a problem where we need to increase precincts. That's my position.
I think that's something you want to do intentionally rather than automatically.
Yes.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
So, are we done with that? We're going to Tom and ranked choice voting.
Thanks, Dan.
Now, you want to present this, Tom? I have some questions, and I'm sure everybody else has questions.
Definitely.
How do you want to deal with this?
Well,
You're
first
the
of all-
guru on this.
That's terrifying. Okay.
Sorry, it's been your,
Right, yeah, I'm just joking. So I have found in the history so far of this sort of push to do voting reform that educational, like interactive educational aids are often helpful, so I made one. I would like to order a pizza for the group for the next meeting. And there's a bunch of pizza places in town. There's not just 2. My concern is
I
that
think this is an analogy.
if all of us, if the
thought you were
members and some
giving us
other
pizza.
people. No, I am gonna order, I will do this, though. I will actually do
All
this.
right, now I'm confused.
So the thing is, what I would like the members, and I printed a couple extras so the student members and the mayor could take part too. what I'd like them to do is to rank Easthampton's pizza places from their favorite to their least favorite.
Great. Is this gonna be on the record?
I'm right
I don't know if
It's all
I
public document.
I
Don't
think
put
this is
your
a
name.
problem.
They're anonymous ballots.
Oh,
that's
there
right.
we go,
Don't put
there we
your
go.
name.
Okay, all right, anonymous ballots, there we go. Thank you.
Leaving anyone out?
Oh, I see what you did
The
there.
office is closed, so they're not.
Yeah, I have two more. Would you guys like to participate?
We were gonna sell, yeah,
Right.
get paisanos in
So
there.
should, you wanna instruct us before we fill anything out?
Well, so the idea, it really isn't, there's a column that says first choice, and in that column, you should fill in the pizza place, which is your first choice for where you want to get your pizza from. And then the second choice, you should do that. You don't have to rank them all, but you can. If you just want to put one, that's totally fine. If you want to do all of them, that's also fine.
The other ones I don't know, is as if I didn't know
Yeah.
person, I don't want to rank them, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's
Was that
fine.
my intention?
Can I ask a big question? It's been burning at.
Yeah.
Does ranked choice voting come into play
Mm-hmm.
if and only if someone does not receive more than 50% of the vote? Because I don't see that.
If somebody receives more than 50% of the vote, they win on the
Automatic.
first round, and there is no need to do any additional steps.
Why isn't that in here someplace? That's what confused
Well,
me.
because the rules aren't in here. The rules are made up by the city council.
Well, that's
So
the problem.
I could tell you exactly why in a second.
Right?
I wanted to
I'm
give
sorry, I
people
just
an
got, it was
opportunity.
burning on me.
But I
didn't
mean,
know.
that's what's scary.
So you want us to turn these into you?
Yeah, and I'm not
Barbara,
gonna
can
do
you
it
get
now.
a machine to count these up, please?
Okay, right, I think my ballot would be invalidated.
We're just gonna let everybody know who Nicole's first choice was.
Machine with great discrimination.
It's hard, because
So-
pizza and slices are two different things.
Right. Yeah, that is true, and there's a lot of factors to consider here. But
I think we have one more ballot.
oh, great.
You're covered in your mouth because you're laughing out loud.
So in Maine, when they were pushing for this, they actually went to breweries and they did beer elections, where everyone would come and try a flight of beers, and they would say, this is my favorite beer, this is my second favorite beer. Because the second that you start talking about politics, things get complicated. The reality is, we're very good at saying, I like this thing more than this thing. It's something we do on a daily basis. We go to the grocery store and the thing we didn't want wasn't there. Well, now what do we want for dinner? It happens all the time. I just wanted to say this because I know that whenever this comes up, there's people who say, this is going to be too confusing for the voters. In the cities and the states where it's been adopted, that historically has not been the case, but really the easiest way to show it is to just say, rank 6 things you know. What do you think? So I just did that. What I'm proposing is
Can I ask a question? Is this language from somebody's, or is this yours?
the language that I've taken here, and I've modified it a little bit to be municipal, is taken from a bill that has been floating around in the State House and the State Senate
Okay.
for about a decade now. It dies in subcommittee every time, but what the bill would do was make it so that what we're proposing, or what I'm proposing doing here, as a charter change, could be done by ordinance. So that municipalities don't have to do what we're doing right now. It gets proposed every session, and every session, like the majority of things that get proposed into the Massachusetts legislature, it mysteriously disappears. But that is where I got this language from. It's not something I just pulled out.
No, I knew that, I just was curious where.
Yeah, and one thing that I will say about this language, I've been in contact with a group called the Ranked Choice Voting Research Center, or Resource Center. And what they are is they're a bunch of election administrators, city clerks, county clerks, state, Secretary of State people, who have, for the most part, many of them have been through this process before in their cities or states, or they are consultants who have helped cities and states go through this, and their job is to make sure that people implement this stuff without it becoming a major crisis. I have, with the permission of the committee, I would like to invite them to video conference into our next meeting, because there's questions about ballot machine upgrades and
How do we do that?
tabulations and stuff like that. Well, we,
Skype in or?
yeah, Mayor LaChapelle said that they've had video conferences
We've done it
before.
before.
So it's
In
possible.
here? What do you
Yeah.
do? You put up a
Put a
large...
screen in front of you, Dan. And
I don't
then-
get, so they hide me, that's good.
Right.
But I mean, seriously, is there a big,
Yeah, we put a screen
and you
figure
project,
out-
a projector, you have that technology?
We have, with the other
Fine.
possibility is that we hold a meeting upstairs and then that maybe gets even a little bit easier. But like, I already spoke to the mayor, you know, the IT staff is willing to set that up. I don't want to make the woman who I want to bring fly up from North Carolina, even though she
Well,
indicated.
no, I don't think the mayor will supplemental appropriation.
She indicated she would be willing to do that. It's, she's
This
they're-
mayor?
No. The person indicated they're funded. They're grant funded. It seems like
No,
overkill,
that-
so I figured we could have them Skype in or something. So there's questions that you might ask over the course of tonight that my answer is going to be that this is going to be a better question for them because they've actually done it. I might have some idea, but one of the things that they basically suggested was that any charter change, and I looked at some other cities that have done this and I saw the same thing, any charter change that that adopts ranked choice voting not have like too many specifications about the exact tabulation technology that you use or the like steps that you use put into it, that be something that's governed by ordinance, because it's stuff that can be very complicated and might be like, there might be something where a new technology emerges that's cheaper and that delivers mathematically the same results but in a slightly different way of just like how the computer algorithm works. So you don't want to tie yourself up in a position like that with enshrining the super specific details in the charter, that you authorize the city to conduct elections. In this way, you authorize the city council to write an ordinance in cooperation with the city clerk and the board of registers of voters. And then the council goes about the business of actually setting that up. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Now that you've explained it, it does. I would only, my biggest concern was the fact that nowhere in here does it say, and I think the voters need to know this when they read this, that this only comes into play if someone does not receive more than 50% of the vote.
So-
In other words, we have a mayor's election, we have 4 people running, and there's only, the highest vote getter gets 30%, then we have to do ranked choice voting. That makes sense. But if it's 51% for one person and the other, I didn't want number 2 and 3, one of those to be the winner.
So-
when we had because this country's based on majority.
So here's the thing. If somebody has 51% in the first round, they can't have their total go down, right? People could have their votes, so they're never going to go under 51%.
The point is though, but if you rank number 2 and number 3, they can't overtake them?
Never, because they have 51% of the vote. Think of it, like if you're saying that more than half of the city ranked that person as their first choice, then someone else could get eliminated and it'll either go to another candidate, in which case they'll still have 51% of the vote, or it'll go to the winner, in which case they have more than 50%.
This
Somebody
makes
could-
sense to me,
Yeah.
but my only
49% of the
problem,
vote and lose.
You could get 49% of the
Yeah.
vote and lose.
But
It
if you
just
get
happened in Maine.
40,
Yeah, you
It
can.
happened.
I've done the
in a
numbers.
2,
Well, you
well, no,
can-
what I'm saying
In a
is right now,
in a
yeah.
three-person race, you could lose
You can.
49%.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so that just happened in Maine.
what you just explained makes sense.
Okay, cool.
Except the layperson, the dummy, and I don't think I'm a dummy, but it did occur to me that maybe a 2 and a 3, I didn't do the math, it makes sense.
No, it's a
But
really
I
common
think
question.
the first thing in here should be in multiple voting, multiple person elections, whatever, any person not, anybody winning 51% of the vote is a winner. I want to make sure that the people understand that it can't be possible, even though mathematically it can't, for someone who's
Okay.
ranked 2 and 3 to win an election, because that would be difficult to sell. You understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I do,
For the
absolutely do.
layperson to know
Yeah.
that if you get 51% of the vote or 50.5, you're elected.
Right.
Is
So,
is
yes.
everybody okay with that? I mean, I'd like to see that in here somehow.
I'll say I understand what you're saying, I'm not going to say I'm okay.
Oh,
So-
And just as Tom a moment ago said, does that make sense? I
Okay.
fully understood what Tom said. I'm not going to say that at this point I'm ready to endorse what Tom said.
oh, no, I don't know if you're endorsing ranked choice voting, but if we're gonna do it, I want it explained as well as possible in here.
Right, I think that that's great feedback. I will say one of the reasons that I left that out is because some communities think it's a good idea, since it mathematically won't change results, to resolve that election anyway, because it gives candidates some feedback about, like, oh, there was this person who didn't do really well, but look, all of their supporters ranked me as their second choice. That's a constituency that I should maybe engage.
That's not gonna be available to people?
Well, it could be, but if we don't conduct the election that way, like if we just stop and we don't actually do the process, then that information.
What you're saying is you want to follow the process through to look at everybody's last choice vote.
I'm totally agnostic about whether or not to do that, but it is like, it doesn't change the results of the election, but it is like a very technical point that nerds who care about this, like, sort of debate on, so it's just something, but I absolutely see what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it.
My point is, if this committee agrees that we wanna do ranked choice voting, we have to sell it
I
to the
agree.
general
No,
public. And that has to be, you don't think we have to sell it?
And I think I mentioned at the last committee meeting, I can see a situation where I say this is an important item that should be put out in front of the voters and not necessarily personally supported.
Oh, I got
So,
you.
all right.
So,
But my-
which
okay.
means I'm not selling it, but
Could I
it's
offer a
worth putting out there
clarification
on the
then?
ballot.
I
Well,
think
but-
what Councilor
okay.
Rist meant was that if we pass this, then advocates of the proposal would have to sell it.
Right.
We,
That's more-
individuals
Yeah,
may or may
correct.
not
It
be
needs to be sold by
advocates.
somebody.
We need to present it in a way that's clear enough.
It would be doing it disservice to not present it in a way that's going to be
Well,
understandable.
and I want the language in the charter that says that, not
Yes.
just presenting it in a ballot thing.
I agree.
But I'm hearing something from Robert that's interesting. We may have non-majority who want to put this on the ballot, who want to do this, but still feel the citizens should vote on it?
Well, since I think that.
Well,
There's
citizens
gonna
has to
take-
vote
tell
on
us.
it.
I was gonna say, there's no.
Oh, no, I'm saying, we could say we don't want to do this and we don't put it on the ballot. We have the right to do that.
Right.
We have the right as a committee to say, we don't agree.
Right.
And if a majority of us say, I'm sorry, I cannot agree to this, I don't even want the voters to do it. You have that right as a committee.
Right.
So what Robert is saying is he may vote in favor of putting it on the ballot, but he may not advocate for it.
And I may not personally believe it's the right thing for the town, for the city, but I may believe it's important for the city as a whole to consider.
Okay, I understand, okay.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, we have the right to say, no, we're not even gonna put this forward. But I'm only bringing that up as that's what our committee is allowed to do. First of all, let's talk about, I'd like to get as much information before we debate this, and I
Yeah.
think Barbara, do you know if next week we could put the meeting upstairs? It would certainly make it easier.
I don't.
Well, I do wanna do it next week.
What's on the meeting calendar?
I have the website, I think.
Google Calendar's on the website.
Well, it'll take me a minute to get to the website. Anyway, I'll deal with that myself. Okay, Barbara and I'll deal with that.
Okay.
This is Barbara?
I don't know, somebody's thoughts. Barbara, your thoughts?
That's it, 28.
Just one point in advocating, the city officials as city officials cannot advocate for a ballot question, nor can they use city resources to support that. Which is why, for instance, the school project had to be sort of supported by a ballot committee. So I think there is a separation between the work of what this committee does and those that support an article.
But I'm looking.
You could be a member of both, right?
Correct.
No worries.
Barbara, there's Energy Advisory Committee, ECA Coordinator Committee, and the Fair Housing Partnership. None of them are upstairs.
No one
right?
is using the,
From what I'm seeing here, we could do it.
it's open.
That's what I have. You have it too, Omar. Okay, so we'll meet upstairs, so we could do this thing with the Skyping in this woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good, great.
Super easy upstairs.
Well, why make it, yeah.
Great.
I wanna, you have more to say, Tom, before I want the membership. Actually, I wanna ask the public to chime
I don't
in when
think
you're done.
Tom's even finished. I don't even think Tom
I
has
said you have
started.
more to say, you have more to
Well,
say.
so I'm gonna interrupt you, Dan. Please keep going, Tom, because you're not done. You're,
All right, well, you do more than I
He's
do.
barely got to the second page, so I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, all right, so
Second page.
there's the thing that I posted, I could just read it aloud, but I assume you guys have all read it, which is the section 5, right?
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah. I want to just say real quickly why I think this is important. I think that there are two reasons why I really care about this here in Easthampton. One reason is I think that while it hasn't happened before, I see no reason to necessarily believe that we couldn't get a mayoral candidate who a solid majority of the public did not support. If you had a handful of like-minded candidates run, and then you had a candidate who was quite different from those candidates, then you could find yourself in a position that
First election didn't happen.
Yes.
yes,
That's why I
it
like
is. So it's entirely possible to do that. Now, you know, Mayor Tosnick's previous subsequent victories suggest that had there been a ranked choice vote, he may very well have been the winner. But we do know that in a sufficiently crowded race, it's entirely possible for that to happen. And given that could have gone a lot of different ways. I mean, I don't want to get overly political about this, but for whatever it's worth, a higher percentage of voters in Easthampton voted for Donald Trump in 2016 than voted for Mike Tosnick in the first mayoral election. So you could find yourself in a position that maybe doesn't, that maybe there's a lot of voters who don't exactly feel like heard simply because some people felt like they wanted to throw their hat in the ring. And I personally don't feel like it's acceptable in a democracy for you to ever say, listen, you have some great ideas. I don't want you to run because I'm worried that you're going to split the vote with this person and this other person that neither of you like is going to get in. I don't think that sort of that sort of strategic thinking should enter into the process. You should be able to go into a voting booth and vote your conscience. And that's not currently something that necessarily is available to us. So this is something that I really care about there. The second thing is, and this is a little bit more obscure, but ranked choice voting changes the tenor of elections. And in a small city where we have to work together, I think it changes the tenor of elections in a positive way. I'll bring it back to this previous example. Say that I am running for re-election and I've got an opponent who, there's some pretty clear differences between the two of us, substantial things we can have an informed debate about. And then say that somebody who basically agrees with me on everything also enters the race. I have the chance of potentially going from having a really good chance of winning to having a very, very low chance of winning. And in that case, it might not be the right thing to do, but the thing that any election advisor, any campaign advisor or chair in the world would tell me to do is to go really, really negative on that person who's really like me, to discredit them, to make it clear to the voters that they are a spoiler candidate and they're going to lead this other person to winning. I can't have
You're saying that if we don't have ranked choice voting,
Yes.
in the current way,
in the current way, I need to get that person out of there so
You need
that I
to
have
have
a
a bloodbath,
chance.
that's
Right,
your-
yeah. Now, the mayor of Portland, Maine has had the system for a long time. It's this really great quote where he said that in previous elections, if he walked up to a house and there was a campaign sign for one of his opponents on the lawn, he wouldn't knock on that door because that person's already made up their mind. There's no reason having this whole awkward conversation. Now, he sees that and he goes up and he says, listen, I know that you're supporting so-and-so as a candidate. They're really great. Here's some ways in which we have a lot in common. Here's some ways we have some common ground. I know that they're your first choice, but I'm hoping that maybe I could be your second choice on the ballot. to me, that is an incredibly powerful thing, especially in a small community, that it doesn't need to get aggressive. You can have civil elections where you explain the differences between people without trying to discredit your opponents. Because if you go nasty on them, you might be my second choice, and you go really nasty on my first choice, maybe you get bumped down that list. Maybe I say, well, never mind, I definitely don't want that person in, because look, they're a nasty person. Those are my two big reasons for supporting this. You know, preliminaries, they kind of do the same thing. There's some concerns I have about preliminaries. The first one is that preliminaries are a whole other election. Preliminaries, historically, in the cities that have them, tend to have very low turnout. Preliminaries in certain overly crowded races can lead to situations, you see this a lot in California, where there's a big field, a bunch of people run, and like, it might be that there's 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans running, and just because of the way it shakes out, only 2 Republicans make it onto the ballot because they were the top 2 vote getters. Even if between the 2 of them, you don't get anywhere close to a majority. I'm not saying that doing this isn't, at sometimes, it's going to be a little complicated. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some money, although I'm pretty convinced it still would take less money in the long run than running preliminaries. That's just my opinion. I do think it is the best way to go. I think it makes more sense. I think it requires less of the voters than showing up twice. And that is the case that I'm going to make. And I imagine that the public has some stuff to say, and I imagine some of you have a lot of questions.
I would like the members to listen to the public before we make comments.
I
want the public to, this is public speak right now for this topic. Raise your hand if you want to talk.
And if you could give me your name, that would be really helpful.
First over here, we'll go around that way. What's your name? No, sorry, I'm going in an order. I'm going in an order, that's all. Go ahead.
Hello, my name's Paul St. Pierre. So, coming to this meeting, under the impression you're considering making the change within the charter so that it would enable the community to, in the future, change the way that elections are done within the city, but you're not actually changing it using the charter to create like a ranked choice.
No, we have to do it. It is in the charter. Because it has to be voted in by the public.
Correct. So, to me, there's more than one choice than status quo or ranked choice voting. We may also, through debate or discussion with the community, find that cardinal choice voting would be preferable, where instead of ranking candidates against each other, they are graded like on a A, B, C, D, E, F scale. Each grade is associated, with a numerical value, and then they're averaged together to find the victim. There are different ways to do this, and so I would wonder if the language in the charter would be accommodating so that the community, if it were to choose other forms of voting, would be able to move in those directions equally as they may move toward ranked choice if that is a preference.
Thank you. Next person.
Hi, my name's Dan Gilbert, and I really appreciate that the town is considering this, in a careful way, because it does require that. This past summer, I decided to do a ballot initiative that was voted on in Pioneer Valley that did pass for our representatives in the state to implement ranked choice voting. I just wanted to report to this committee that I did collect signatures for this issue in our district, which includes Easthampton. Because I wasn't targeting this district, we didn't get enough for it to be on the general election ballot, but there were close to 150 signatures of Easthampton residents that were certified in support of this. And that was for the state and federal level, but I do think that it's sort of up to towns to lead by example for doing this. And then I'm sure there's other people who have a lot to add, but I just wanted to bring up some examples, which are in a recent mayoral race, this is in California, where they do use this on a city level. There was a situation where 2 candidates actually campaigned together and said, vote for me, number one, and for my opponent, number two, and vice versa. And what that did is it turned what was going to be a blowout election by the incumbent into an incredibly close race. And significantly raised the tenor. There was also a situation on a town council, and I think this was in the Midwest, where, and this is just sort of a funny story, but all of the candidates, after a debate, sang Kumbaya together. There's video of this on the internet.
So you're saying it's positive?
Oh, yeah. It does, Tom's points about it changing the tenor of an election from negative campaigning to positive is there's ample evidence for this being the case. And then the final thing is, here in Massachusetts, in our most recent election, statewide election, Congressional District 3 had a election with many candidates. The winner, Lori Trahan, won with 21.6% of the vote. So 21.6% of people in that district voted for the winner. So over 70% of people voted for someone as their first choice who did not win. So
Okay.
that is someone winning with a plurality of votes and not a majority, and not even anywhere close to a majority of approval. So, and this happens all the time. It's not common. I mean, it's not more often than not, but it does happen, and it happens with regular frequency, and it happens here, especially when there's significantly more than 3 people running. So that's the serious problem, and that's the problem that this solves in an elegant way that regular people can understand if they're given the opportunity to do so.
Okay, thank you. I need a lot of people talking. Next.
That's Siegel. Thank you, Tom. I didn't know anything about ranked choice voting before tonight. At least now I have an idea. It doesn't mean I'm for or against it, but at least I know what it's about, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Laurel Gardner, I just want to say the reason I came here tonight is I'm very excited. I hope that it's time to decide on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so.
Name?
Can I have your name, please?
Oh, Eli Dana. Yeah, so, I wholeheartedly support this for all the reasons that Councilor Peak and these people specified. The current system that we have, which is usually called first past the post, the way that we vote, is really a fundamental flaw in the machinery of democracy. It means that people, the candidate that wins is not necessarily the one that's favored by most of the voters, and it leaves people feeling that they are not free to vote for the candidate that they really prefer because of the spoiler effect. And I hadn't even thought about the effect that it would have on how people campaign. That's an incredible, that's a fascinating idea that I didn't even think about. So, yeah, there's one technical point that I wanted to comment on in Councilor Peak's proposal. So it doesn't specify a particular method of determining the winning candidates from the rankings that the voters submit. And it does specify certain constraints, which are all reasonable, but there's one, I think, that says, whatever method is chosen, it has to be such that your choice for lower ranked candidates doesn't affect the prospects for your higher ranked candidates to win. Am I right? There is something that says that? All right.
And all of that, according to his recommendation, can be changed through ordinance.
Yeah.
These are recommendations that should be dealt with in ordinance.
Right. So yeah.
What you're saying is, yes, it could be changed at the local level after this is put in.
Right.
Based on this particular thing.
Right. But but the one requirement, which seems to be important for people's confidence in the system, that your lower, as I said, that your choice for lower ranked candidates doesn't affect the prospects for the higher ranked candidates, but there are some reasons why you might not want that requirement. There are many different methods for choosing the winner from the rankings. One of them, which is my preferred system, is called the board account method, which is where essentially, your first rate candidate gives 10 points to that candidate. Your second choice gives, or not 10, but say if there are 10 candidates, right? Then your first choice gets 10 points for your vote. Your second choice gets 9 points, and then you add up all the points and compare them. And this does not meet that requirement, but it has other advantages. For one thing, it allows under the most the most well-known ranked choice voting system is the kind of instant runoff method, which you might be familiar with, where you eliminate the lowest, the candidate with the lowest amount of votes, reassign their votes to the other candidates, and you keep doing that until you're down to one. One drawback of that method is that you can have a candidate win that not many people that a few people love, but most people don't like, over a candidate that no one loves but everyone likes.
Okay,
And
Eli, I gotta move on, so I appreciate all you're saying, but a lot of what you're saying, according to this method that Tom's bringing up, is developed in ordinance.
What I'm saying is that one of the requirements limits the methods that can be chosen in the ordinance.
Okay, well, we take it under advisement. Next, please. Is there something? Ma'am, did you want to say something?
I sure do. I'm Gwen Morrissey, and I'm here in support of ranked choice voting. I think that making our community able to be more engaged in a positive way can only be good for this city. And it gives people a little more power over who really hears them and who feels like they are told. I think that's valuable.
Thank you. Next. We're
Caleb
gonna go.
Shore. My name is Caleb Shore. I would also, I thank Councilor Pete for bringing this to the committee, and I would echo the sentiments of those before me in support of this. I think that this sets a positive tone moving forward.
Ma'am.
My name's Andrea Stone, and I'm very much in favor of anything that's going to increase voter turnout, which that's really how we speak, and raise the tenor and the tone.
Okay.
I'm Kelly Crisp, and I'm also here in favor of ranked choice voting for some of the same reasons as people have already stated. I think it'll raise the tenor, positive tenor of elections. I think it'll actually increase voter turnout. People don't feel like they have to come and vote against somebody. They can vote for somebody that they really want to elect and be confident that their second choice may still have a chance.
Thank you. Sir?
Stan Diamond, very much in favor of ranked choice voting, especially because it is the only way in this country, not so much on municipal elections, but on state and national elections, it's the only way for third-party candidates to gain power within the government. And that opens up the election to many more voices, many more opinions, and I think it's a much more democratic solution than, winner take all. And you never wind up with somebody with less than a majority vote becoming an official in the government.
Thank you. Laura?
Laura Scott. I just want to echo what everyone said. Somebody described this process as elegant, and I think that's a beautiful summary. I would support ranked choice voting for all of the pragmatic reasons that were laid out, and for the more emotional reasons that I think were touched on over here. In my experience in working on campaigns and observing campaigns, you can see a lot. I've worked with a lot of really fantastic people of high character, but it is a difficult thing to feel like you have to throw down a gauntlet, especially in a small municipality, and make campaigns overly personal. And I think this is a way of not only diversifying representation, maybe giving a little bit more voice to some libertarian members of our community, Green Party members, conservative members of our community that don't get a lot of representation on council, but it also prevents spoiler effects from executive races as well. And then with that added bonus of disincentivizing shady campaign tactics and incentivizing collaboration, true debate, really rigorous verbal exercise of ideas, policy. I think it would be an utter game changer, and I fail to see any drawbacks, honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask Melissa and/or Barbara, and then I'm going to ask the membership, given its late time, whether we just want to absorb all this. Melissa, do you have anything you want to comment on? No? Barbara's got your, all right.
Okay.
Barbara, you gave us a lot of information. I appreciate that.
I did, and I please read it, especially, just take the time and see. Okay, I'm gonna say
I
that.
appreciate that you did all this work. This is tremendous.
Well, I'm gonna say that I know a lot more about this method than I did a few weeks ago. I of course am looking at it from the
Pragmatic.
standpoint of somebody has to run this election and, administer it. And I don't think there's anybody here except Melissa who's ever worked at the polls. So, So I just want my thoughts to come out and please look at it. I did go back and I looked through all of our elections going back to 1996. It was interesting. For the most part, the winner was clear. So just take a look. I thought it was pretty interesting. The thing with the way that it's worded in here, it sounds like it would be for all races. Now, most places that have ranked choice voting in the country, the majority of them are just single winner races. Portland, Maine, most places. There are some that have multi-thing. I just want everybody to try to imagine. I think voting for counselor at large and school committee where you can vote for 4 people, it's a little confusing as to how you vote. I mean, everybody, you voted for just one pizza. We would just have one winner for your pizza place, but you'd have 4 and 6. If you look at that, actually, as part of the Minneapolis study, they tell about how you figure multi-races. And I just want you to kind of look. You wouldn't even know what the amount that you would need to win until after you know how many votes you have.
So you're saying it's difficult at the at-large level because over the school committee level?
The mayor level, you're voting for 1 or 2 people. I think for most people, that's pretty easy to understand. But when you get down to the multi-seat races, I think it could get, pretty confusing for the general.
I know you're going to say that.
That's just my thought.
Okay.
I also have to remind everybody that we do have machines and they are capable of being programmed. And if everything works wonderfully and nothing goes wrong, it probably would be fine. Whatever software that we would have to buy to do the ranking would figure it out somehow. Some computer algorithm would do it. But no machine is perfect, and sometimes machines go down. Sometimes ballots get wet because people are holding it up against them. Sometimes they can't go in, so they require hand counting. I'm sorry, but I think it would be really confusing to try to hand count ranked choice voting. It's just my opinion.
Okay.
I just think it would be. And if there was a recount, nobody's ever going to ask for a machine recount. They're going to ask for a hand count recount. Just try to picture that in your head. I just have to say these things because as voters, it probably sounds like a great thing, and it may not be that confusing. Yeah, pick your favorite cookie, do this and that, but it can be more complicated. So let me see, what else? I also think we have people here that are in favor of it, and that's fine. But there are a lot of people out there these days who don't trust the elections as they are right now. I really wonder if there may be people out there that will say, well, you know, I marked this person, but what happened to my votes in the machine, the computer algorithm? Where did my votes go? How did they get manipulated? How do I know that my second choice really went towards my, I mean, I see it. I just wonder how long it would take before somebody would not trust the results. So, I also have to say that most places that have ranked choice voting are large. They're like a Portland, Maine, a San Francisco, a Santa Fe. They have a large department, they have a staff, they have a legal staff, they have professional people. It is like me and my assistant, and that's kind of it. And my poll workers, they do a great job. You know, they would, I just really don't, I mean, what's happening statewide is that the word ranked choice voting is starting to come up. And I'm not gonna say that down the road, it might not come about on a state level. I've spoken to the elections director, the word is out there, we've heard it mentioned at a conference that it may eventually come about. At that point, there would be all sorts of guidance from the state, there would be regulations that would take a lot of work setting it up. It would all be, there would be support from other clerks. It would be like, we would have support. I mean, no offense to my counselors now or 2 years or 4 years from now, but I'm not confident that an ordinance would be clear enough. Even using something from another state, New England is different, and we still have to follow state election laws. We, you know, the charter does what it does, but the state election laws still have to be followed. I mean, maybe down the road, if it comes in statewide, it could then be much easier to implement it on a local level. And if it was going to be on a local level, I would think it'd be much better to just have it for mayor, or just have it for a single winner race over all of the other ones. So on my second page, there are costs involved. The computers would have to be upgraded. The vendor is speaking with the elections division about that happening anyway. So that could happen. There's a software that if we were to use a program that our vendor, the ImageCast, uses someplace else, which may be Santa Fe, which that's the one I keep hearing about, it would be about $8,500, and then there would be a licensing fee. If we were to go with any other kind of way of doing it, I think Cambridge, our vendor said that they're spending like $100,000 to come up with how they're going to handle their ranked choice. There's not just one kind of ranked choice voting. There's instant runoff. There can be many different ways that it's done. So you have to keep that in mind. Obviously, the programming would increase, the ballot printing would increase. And I would think that the council, you need to have somebody come in and help draft regulations. There's no way that the council has the expertise, and I don't, and my board of registrars. You can put that in there if you want, but none of us have the knowledge to come up with all the details that I would need to run an election and feel confident that I knew what was going on. The voter education is vitally important, obviously. I mean, I try to picture my 92-year-old father trying to understand this, and I just don't see it. I see elderly people vote, and they don't understand lots of times how to do it now. I mean, you know, as time goes by, maybe they would understand it, but I think there would be a lot of confusion, especially among the older voters. Obviously, there'd have to be training of me and the poll workers, and we'd need somebody to do that. I mean, our vendor, the vendor that did Maine is not the vendor that we have. I did speak to that vendor at a conference. How they did it in Maine was, it was on the local level, just the first round of voting. And then if it had to be further ranked, everything went to the state capitol and they did it there. So the local communities, they didn't find it was that bad because really they just did their regular election day and everything was ranked at the state level. The Portland, Maine clerk, she uses a consultant even to do the tally, the ranking at the end of the night. She says she doesn't trust herself to do it. She uses this company called True Ballot, I think it is. They're working with Cambridge as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just, I understand the whole idea, and I'm not entirely opposed to it, but you have to understand that you can't just say, oh, it's a great idea. You know, I don't know if it increased voters or not, but there's a lot to it, a lot of details, and if you don't have the details, it's just gonna be a mess. I mean, time will tell what happens with ranked choice voting, and it may end up on the state level, but if it did, we would have all sorts of support, and there would be guidance and regulations. So, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in here, and this thing about for Minneapolis is old. There's questions in there that they posed at the time. I think it's pretty interesting. But there's stuff about the voting equipment we can skip over, but they're talking about, you know, legal counsel reviewing the charter to make sure there's no, you know, it's complying with the state law. It's pretty interesting. But so that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the administration side of it, which is much more complicated than just going to the polls and marking your ballot.
Okay.
So I guess that's it for now.
Okay, wait. It's 8 o'clock. I would like to ask Shane and Lucas to look into what cities across the country have. I especially am wondering whether tabulating paper ballots. Oh, all right, we have it. That was fast. You guys are good. But I'd like to know more about the possibility of an election having to be tabulated by hand and how they did it. If there's any way you could find out about that. The rest of the night, unfortunately, because it's late and we started on this, we already had a lot. We're going to continue this discussion at the next meeting. You're all welcome. It's going to be upstairs. The membership of this committee has a lot to absorb. I learned a great deal from Tom tonight and from everybody else and from Barbara. Barbara's done a great deal of homework. We have a little bit to look at. So if the membership is okay, I'd like to adjourn and go forward next week. The only thing on the topic on this agenda will be Article 7, and we'll spend most of the time on ranked choice voting. At that time, we'll hear more from the public if you're there, but then we're going to get to the membership to hear what you think. Okay? And we'll have a week to think about it. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes. Just one point of housekeeping.
Yes.
Antonio's won, so I'll be bringing.
Shit, that's not my first choice.
I would like you to hold those.
I would like a ballot. I would like it.
Yeah.
I don't agree. Was there an algorithm used in your calculation?
No, it didn't matter. Antonio's got 7 votes on the first round.
I need a motion to adjourn.
Excuse me, Dan, one thing, if I can.
Yeah.
In the interest of completeness, could we also ask Shane, apologize for forgetting.
Lucas,
to also tabulate communities that have adopted ranked choice voting and rescinded it, because those do exist as well. There have been, you know, it's gone both ways. So
All right, so Shane and Lucas, one of your resources is Barbara. And after you get to Barbara, could you do both of those things? I'd like to know how many times they had to do a recount by hand, and whether or not whether it was rescinded because it was too complicated. Anything that's written out there that goes to the administration of this is important to me, because it really does make a difference. All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
was one that rescinded.
We are adjourned.
Right, Burlington?